Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
This is the Daily Memphian Politics Podcast. I'm Bill Dries. Our main event is Republican State Representative Mark White on the 3Gs, constitutional open carry, and his recent re-election. Top of the podcast, Shelby County Republicans will have a new local party chair out of the April 25th County Party Convention. Chris Tudor, party chairman for the last 2 years, starting after the 2018 Democratic sweep of county general elections, telling the local party steering committee that he will not be seeking another term. Despite earlier plans to do that, he and his wife are now expecting their 5th child. Different ground rules for the party convention: no caucuses, and then a week's break before the chairman and steering committee are chosen. It will all be done at one session at Arlington High School on the 25th. Local Democrats have put off their party convention until August. In fact, all local Democratic Party reorganization conventions in the state delayed by a vote of the State Executive Committee in January. That, as new Tennessee Democratic Party Chairman Hendrell Remus undertook a reorganization of his party at the state level. Meanwhile, a follow-up to our discussion last week on the proposal to move the countywide property reappraisal for taxation purposes from the current once-every-4-year cycle to a once-every-other-year cycle. The Shelby County Republican Party Steering Committee coming out against the change, saying it would be a waste of county funds. The sentiment on its way to the County Commission, which is scheduled to vote on the change at its April 12th session. Since we last met, Waste Pro USA has said it wants out of its $33.9 million contract with the city to pick up garbage in Area E, otherwise known as Cordova, Hickory Hill, and East Memphis. The company did this by press release with no formal notice to the city, and the wording of that release suggests a negotiated end to the 5-year pact that began July 1st of 2019. That while the company says it's apparent to them that the city does not want a private company involved anymore and describes the city's communications with Waste Pro as, quote, caustic. The city already had Waste Pro on a 20-day notice by terms of the contract to either improve its service in Area E or consider the contract over. That 20-day notice runs out April 10th. Meanwhile, 6 Cordovans, including 2 who live in the South Cordova area that was de-annexed from the city effective New Year's Day 2021, have filed a Chancery Court lawsuit seeking $38.8 million in damages for 6 years of garbage pickup by Waste Pro and its predecessor, Inland Waste Services, that the lawsuit estimates saw their garbage picked up on time 40% of the time during that 6-year period. The lawsuit is against the City of Memphis and Memphis Light, Gas, and Water Division because the solid waste fee is on the monthly light, gas, and water bill. The attorneys are seeking class action status. If granted, that would allow other Area E residents to join the lawsuit. Meanwhile, Waste Pro saying it wanted to work its crews in Area E on Good Friday, but was denied permission by the city. Speaking of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, on its way to the City Council is a new version of the $520,000 contract with GDS Associates that the Council rejected last October, thus derailing the utility's examination of options for leaving the Tennessee Valley Authority for the past 6 months. The Light, Gas, and Water Board approved the new version on a unanimous vote. It provides for the Council to be able to have a look as well at the bids, price quotes, and rates that GDS will gather and oversee for the utility as they come in. That information should be assembled for some preliminary discussions by the end of the year, with a decision sometime in the first quarter of 2022 by the Utility Board on whether it's time to give TVA the required 5-year notice or start negotiations on a new long-term agreement with TVA. The Council could vote on the GDS contract as early as its April 6th meeting. On to the open constitutional gun carry bill that, as we record before the Easter weekend, is awaiting the signature of Governor Bill Lee after clearing the Senate and then the House in Nashville. In the 19-member Shelby County delegation to the legislature, 5 state senators and 14 state representatives, 3 voted for the measure: Kevin Vaughn and Tom Leatherwood in the House, and Paul Rose in the Senate. Democrat Joe Towns not present at the vote. More on this coming up in our interview with Mark White. An update on the Ford case includes an exchange of letters in February between County Mayor Lee Harris and County Commission Chairman Eddie Jones. Harris proposed limiting the ability of County Commissioner Edmund Ford Jr. to propose grants, as Ford's proposal of a $450,000 grant to junior achievement in 2019 is being investigated by a special prosecutor. The allegation from a special counsel's report to the county attorney's office is that Junior Achievement spent $45,000 of the grant buying computer equipment from Ford, which violated the county charter and could lead to Ford's ouster from the commission. Jones turned down Harris's request to limit Ford's abilities as an elected official, saying he has not been convicted of any wrongdoing or even formally accused. Carolyn Watkins, the longtime county government equal opportunity compliance administrator, tapped by Mayor Jim Strickland to be the newest Memphis City Court judge. If approved by the City Council, Watkins would fill the vacancy created by the January death of Teresa Jones. Jones was elected in the 2019 city elections to a full 8-year term. The office goes on the 2023 city ballot as a special election for the remaining 4 years of the term of office, for which Watkins could run as well. Joining us now is State Representative Mark White of Memphis. Representative White is sponsoring the bill pending in the Tennessee General Assembly about the 3 Gs, Germantown elementary, middle, and high schools. Since the demerger of public education in Shelby County into 7 school systems, those 3 schools within the city limits of Germantown have remained a part of Shelby County Schools instead of the Germantown Municipal School District. The bill would also address Lucy Elementary School in Millington, which also remains part of SCS. Representative White, this is a proposal that, as I understand it, Germantown city leaders brought to you, correct?
That is correct. The city leaders of Germantown brought this to me. As a District 83 representative, which I represent both Shelby County school systems that fall in the East Memphis area, as well as the Germantown Municipal School District. So I brought this on their behalf.
Okay. So walk me through this, because like all things that seem simple at the outset, this does become somewhat complicated in order to become state law.
Correct. Well, the process is, of course, working with them and with the city of Germantown as we put together the legislation. The legislation basically has been put forward mainly to get negotiations going. As you just said earlier, when the municipal school districts were formed in Shelby County, which Germantown, Collierville, Lakeland, Arlington, Millington, and Bartlett were able to form their own school systems. All things went well, but the Shelby County school system wanted to keep 3 of the schools that fell within the Germantown Municipal School District and the city of Germantown within the Shelby County school system. That's Germantown High School, Germantown Middle School, and Germantown Elementary. So they kept those. And so we moved forward at that point. Well, it's been 8 years since the municipal school district started, and the city of Germantown would like to have discussions with Shelby County Schools about the future of these schools, because they're in their city limits and they are within the municipal school district of Germantown, and they would like to have control over those schools again in their community.
hmm So while the three Gs are the reason for this bill, it would apply to public school districts across the state. I mean, are there situations like Lucy Elementary and the three Gs elsewhere in the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, there may be. I think there may be one or two areas, not many, of course, Lucy and that, but also part of the bill. It says unless there is a mutual agreement of understanding between the parties, and that's what we're trying to get at. Right now, there's not a mutual agreement between the two parties in this particular issue. Now, if Lucy and the school at Millington, if they have a mutual agreement between the Shelby County Schools and Millington School District, then that's fine. So we want to come to mutual agreement. That's the kicker in all this.
Mm-hmm. And if the two sides cannot reach an agreement, what happens then? Do things stay as they are, or is there some interaction by the state with this?
Right. In any piece of legislation in the court, you have to have a little teeth in it, or else it's just a suggestion and there's no need to run it. So this particular bill says that within 6 months of the time this bill is passed, the two systems have to get together and come to some type of an agreement moving forward. And then they have, I'm trying to think of how much more longer, but to come to an agreement within 6 months. And then if there is no agreement, then the schools that fall within the geographic boundaries of another LEA, in this case, Germantown School District, then they would revert to that particular district, or the Commissioner of Education can withhold funds from the district that they are currently in.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. So beyond that, though, there are issues of debt for building a school that might have been built in the last 15 or so years, or for school improvements that were made in that. How does that get worked out if the two sides can't come to an agreement on things like debt?
Right. Well, of course, this bill doesn't address that. That would be a much deeper topic. So what we're asking for is that the two systems over the next 6 months sit down at the table and try to work that out, and hopefully they can do so. Mm-hmm. Bottom line is, now we had an AG opinion a few years back where one LEA that authorizes a charter school, they cannot operate that charter school in another LEA or school district.
Right.
And so we already have precedent that one LEA should not operate in another LEA's geographic boundaries.
Mm-hmm. And we should say LEA is shorthand for a local education organization or agency association. Right. Basically a school district. Have you had reaction from legislators in other parts of the state, good, bad, or indifferent to this?
Well, no one's come to me yet. And so this has just really started moving last week. We've run it through the subcommittee. It passed out of education subcommittee. It will be in the full committee next week. So far, it's more of a local issue because we have it in their mutual consent. And so in the other places where it's operating, it's always been mutual consent.
Mm-hmm. All right. So needless to say, this will be going through the committee system if it's not already. And if this is a 2-year session, people often think annual session of the legislature, but this could take place anytime over the next 2 years.
That is correct. In the language of the bill, that's why we're asking for 6 months. This bill passes, the 6-month period would start by July the 1st of this year. It gives to the end of the year. And that way, if while we're still in the 112th session, that would give us as a legislature a chance to amend or move further if things are not worked out.
So the overall goal statewide seems to be to get all of the schools that are within a certain boundary to get all of those outliers that are the exception to that, to kind of in a one-time only instance, to get that resolved one way or the other.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
That is the issue. When what has happened, I'm a strong believer in community, and ever since this has happened, in 2013. The community of Germantown has been at odds over this issue. There are many residents in Germantown, south of Poplar, where these schools are, who have to send their students over to further away because they are zoned in the Germantown Municipal School District. And so it's just kind of divided the community in many ways. And so as a strong supporter of community, I told them I would help them at least bring this to the table for negotiations.
Mm-hmm. The Shelby County Schools, as we know it today, at the outset of the demerger process, the superintendent Dorsey Hobson said, look, we have a bulge of students right up against the border with Germantown. And he cited the number of students then at Germantown High School and the other two Gs who did not really live in Germantown under the old setup. This was. So is there some provision in here to work out for the students who are now attending Germantown High School in particular, who want to graduate from there, but who, if this were just enforced in a limited way, would be out as soon as they come to an agreement or as soon as the 6 months is up?
A good question. And the answer to that is no. Is very important to me. Anytime you do anything, first and foremost, I understand that we need to have negotiations between the two party of adults and the two school systems, but we always need to take care of the students. So I kept in the language that any student that is currently in these schools would continue to be in these schools at least through the 2027, 2028 school years, or 6 years from now, for so they can complete their high school education if they are in like middle school and moving forward. So the students that is part of the bill, and I maintain that stay in there, because if the students want to stay in those schools, they should be able to do so. Mm-hmm. That will also give the two parties a chance in the years to come to work things out if there needs to be additional buildings built and or another agreement worked out.
All right. Let's switch topics. On its way to the governor now for his signature is the open constitutional gun carry bill. And I've got the vote totals in front of me, but let's just tell the listeners here, where were you in the House vote that approved this and sent it to the governor, and why did you vote the way you did on it?
For sure. Yeah, I voted no on that. It's permitless carry, constitutional carry as it's called. There was not a single law enforcement agency in this state that supported that bill. I am very concerned for the law enforcement officers who are on the streets every day having to enforce the law. When I'm sleeping in bed safe at 3:00 in the morning, we have men and women who are on our streets out there enforcing the law. And if they do not approve of this, then I cannot go along. So I was a no vote on the constitutional carry bill. I believe that we have a great permitting system currently in this state. It's been working well. There have been no problems. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, but I see no reason why, if I want to take a gun out of my house or out of my car, which, by the way, you can keep all the guns you want to in your car and your home as a protection. Your car is an extension of your home, like when you're going to work. But when you're out on the public streets with a firearm, I like to know that you are permitted and that you're legal. And number one, that you've had a little safety training to know the dangers of that firearm. And I think that's for the protection of all society. When I get in a car and I drive on the public highways, I have to have a driver's license and insurance in case I hurt somebody else. So I just think Second Amendment rights, as well as getting a permit if you want to carry a gun out in public, protects everyone. And it also protects our police officers who have to walk up to somebody that has a gun on their side.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel like there was pressure on you as a Republican legislator to vote for this proposal made by other Republican legislators and favored by a Republican governor?
Absolutely not. There were no pressure on me. I told them from day one that I could not support the bill, especially in the area where we live in the city of Memphis, where we have issues with crime. We have issues with guns stolen out of cars all too frequently. My message to all law-abiding people: if you go have a gun in your car, please secure it before you get out. If you can take it into your house at night, do that. If you cannot do that, then make sure it's locked up in the trunk or in a secure place where those who are looking for guns in cars and breaking in cannot get them. But there was absolutely no pressure. I told them, and they said, that's fine. We understand you vote your district.
Mm-hmm. What was this a bill that was not right for Memphis specifically, or do you think there are problems with open constitutional carry for the state beyond Memphis?
Well, what I originally said is that when you have open carry or concealed carry without a permit, and that means that anyone can, carry the gun, I just think it puts our law enforcement officers at an extreme disadvantage, because they've got to walk up and have a conversation basically. Before, way it was right now with the permitting system, if a person had a gun on them, the police officer could say, "Do you have a permit?" Now you can't say, "Do you have a permit?" and you just don't know. And I just think the unknown is what worries me about this.
Right. In general, this is one of those proposals that is cited when critics of a red state legislature will say the party that says local government and the least government is the best is coming up with a lot of proposals that have just the opposite effect. On this and on some of the other proposals we've seen, do you believe that's the case?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking there. Is, the day and times we live in. Of course, even back in the Old West, remember Wild Earp, the Dodge City, they eventually said you got to check your guns in the sheriff's office when you come into town, because there were issues around that where things, just to protect everyone. Mm-hmm. But in the city of Memphis, where I've lived since the mid 1960s, where we're having interstate shootings, we're having too many of our young people shot accidentally by drive-bys and things like that. I just think we just, I'm very strong on Second Amendment, but I think that with freedom comes extreme responsibility, and especially when you carry a firearm, because things can get out of hand real quick.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on HR 1 in Washington, changes to election procedures versus the election reforms that have been proposed across a pretty wide spectrum in Nashville by both Democrats and Republicans?
Right. Well, I don't support the HR 1. I think that's constitutionally belongs to the states. Each state should be able to have a system where they can protect all voters, and that one person, one vote. I do not have an issue with requiring photo ID, government issued ID, to make sure that each person votes one time, and that they are registered to do so. I don't think that's an infringement on your voting privilege at all. We have to have an ID for every single other thing that we do in society, and so not only for the protection of others, but having one person, one vote, and being able to control that by the states is very important.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about absentee voting? We saw a big uptick, as you know, in absentee voting because of the pandemic allowances that were made. Should absentee voting be more open, or is it open enough as far as you're concerned?
Well, absentee voting, I think this is where it gets confusing. Absentee voting is different from mail-in voting, which was going on in many of our states. Absentee voting is fine. That's where a registered voter contacts the election commission in the area where they live and requests an absentee vote. They then check that off the list, mail that to the person sends that back in, and then you have an actual registered voter who is accounted for. A mail-in vote, which they're pushing for now, is just where you just send out an election form, and anybody can send it back in. They don't even want a signature on it. Send it back in, and I voted for so and so. I think that messes up the whole accountability of our election system. So absentee voting, yes, is fine. Mail-in voting with no verification of who's voting is not good.
Okay. Speaking of the last election, you won re-election to the District 83 seat you're in your 6th two-year term, correct?
I believe that's correct. It came in 2010, halfway
Right.
through one of the sessions. Yes.
Okay. You won last year with 54% of the vote against the Democratic nominee, Jerry Green, as Democrats stepped up their game in a few districts across the state. Your district, as you mentioned, takes in East Memphis, South Windike, and Germantown. Is this part of the suburbs changing, or are Democrats making more of an effort, or a bit of both, do you think?
I think it's a bit of both. And I think most voters, and that's why I can put out most voters, they don't want to see extremes on either end, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. They're looking for people who will listen and try to find solutions and not run things just for political reasons. So I've always tried to hold that position. I think my job is to listen and find solutions, not to push things, politically. But the Democrat parties have been very successful in other states like North Carolina and Georgia, taking urban seats. And I think they felt a little momentum going there. So they came very strongly after District 83, the seat I represent, as well as the former Jim Coley seat, who he retired, was able to hold on to that seat too. So they're just a big movement to try to take over these urban areas where I think a lot of the people who live in these areas want solutions more than they want political posturing.
It was very interesting. And the other district here that you talked about, Jim Coley's seat that he chose not to run for re-election to, what was actually, I think, the closest race outside of a Bartlett alderman's race on the ballot. And that was a race where John Gillespie won that particular seat, the Republican nominee, over the Democratic nominee, Gabby Salinas. In your district and in that district, what I noticed was the phenomenon of yard signs in yards that would have a Biden sign right next to one of your signs or a sign for John Gillespie, and nothing scientific. The old adage that we both heard and probably used is yard signs don't vote. But is that an indication of some kind of change?
Between having two political parties in the same yard?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that shows, and that's what I work very hard to accomplish. I think it shows, especially an educated voter who pays attention and listens to the issues. But the fact that they would, have political signs of opposing parties and whatnot. But I think what the people are looking for is those who listen and those who find solutions, and not get too far on one side. Like you mentioned, political signs. Like I said, they don't vote, but you have to have them because that lets your constituency know that you're at least out working, and they want to make sure that you're working for the vote.
Sure. Absolutely. So how much longer does the session go this year?
Well, it looks like we've been moving pretty fast. We're starting to close our subcommittees this week and next week. It looks like we may be at least here through the first week of May. Once our full committee's closed, then everything is in finance. One good thing about Tennessee, we have to balance our budget, and no bill can be passed if it's got a fiscal note on it unless we can find the money for it. And so that's a good thing. But a lot of times, good bills we can't even get passed because they have a money issue. So we have that challenge. So then everything will be in finance committee, and then we'll go to we'll be on the House floor in the last 2 weeks, not only finishing up bills, but also working on the budget. We had to balance our budget every year. And the good news about that's why Tennessee has a recognition as the most fiscally responsible state in the nation right now. And
sometimes there are quarrels over the fiscal notes, aren't there? Or are there disputes about them?
There are on what is the best way, to spend the money. Tennessee, by the way, has been very fortunate. We've gone through the COVID and we really haven't, our revenue has not been down. We're a state that is growing. Industry looks at us because we're also the number one business friendly state. So industries are looking at our state from all over the country. We have, the lowest tax rate because we do not have an income tax. And the 10 years that I've been up here, we've taken off over 700 to 800 million of taxes off the citizens of Tennessee that used to be on there. So we're very business friendly, low tax. And so that brings in business and the industry.
All right. That's where we'll leave it. We have been talking with State Representative Mark White of Memphis. This week on WKNO's Behind the Headlines, we are joined by Melanie Keller, CEO and President of the nonprofit Meriton, and Reverend Keith Norman, Vice President of Baptist Memorial Healthcare, as well as pastor of First Baptist Church on Broad. We will be discussing the vaccination effort to meet the city's most isolated where they are. You can hear the podcast of that show on our website now. Subscribe to the Daily Memphian at dailymemphian.com. You can subscribe to this podcast and our others at Google Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. I'm Bill Dries. The Daily Memphian Politics Podcast is produced by Kix Patterson.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.